Hey guys, this is Prokopenko. I'm here with Marshall Vandruff and Stuart Ng, and we have a pretty nice treat for you. At Comic-Con, Marshall and I met up with Stuart and found out that he has an original Heinrich Kley sketchbook, and immediately I thought, how can I make a video about this? And we found out that Stuart's gonna be doing a Kickstarter, right?
That's correct.
And what are you gonna do with the Kickstarter?
Well, we want to create a facsimile reproduction of the entire sketchbook. It is 36 pages of drawings, 72 pages total, and the size of it is 14 by 20 inches. And what we hope to do is create as close a reproduction as possible.
Cool. So yes, it's gonna be the same size, and you're gonna try to make the cover look the same as well?
Exactly. It'll be 3/4 cloth with these plain boards that are wrapped at each corner. We're not going to scuff it up, but we're going to try and make it as close to the original as possible in every way.
Cool. What we're gonna do right now is Marshall, who is a huge fan of Heinrich Kley, he's gonna flip through, we're gonna show every page, and he's gonna just talk.
I am.
All right, Marshall, take it away.
Well, first of all, I am nervous because I'm in the presence of a real Heinrich Kley sketchbook, which I've never seen in my life until this summer at the Comic-Con, when Stuart said that he was acquiring one, and then he had acquired one, and he gave us a private viewing of it. I'm assuming those dates in the upper left corner mean April 26, 1938?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is late in his career, and we are seeing a theme that he did many times where he's got lizards and reptiles talking to old men and somebody lecturing the other. But what I was surprised to see, because I've not seen it in sketchbooks before, is that he's not only got floral illustrations here, these are done incidentally, for those of you who are artists, without preliminary pencil work underneath them. They're done with dip pen, and they look to me, since I just read in these marvelous lost art books, is it Picture This Press that put those out? And I hope I'm pronouncing his name correct, Alexander Kunkel, said that he'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, every morning, to begin working, and apparently he would do warm-up exercises. It looks as if these are warm-up exercises. And here we're starting to see the stuff that we know him for. In this case, he's getting to be an old man. He's probably close to 70 by this time. And he's got a lot of old men, some of whom are removing their heads and their flesh is falling off. And look at these. They look like his hands. I'm assuming, if he was right-handed, that he was posing his left hand. But this is really not that exciting a work, considering what he's known for. But the best thing that I get out of it is that if we knew real life celebrities and movie stars whom we ascribe such glamorous lifestyles to, that we might find out that behind the scenes they go through the same prosaic work that everybody else does and live the same kinds of lives in some ways. And here's what we're seeing is that someone who did stuff that was never meant to be published, apparently. It was keeping in shape.
Oops. Well, we're going to publish it.
Oh, yeah, here we are. The better part of 100 years, and a full 100 years after the stuff that he's mainly known for. He didn't know that we would have such tools as we have now to be able to do this as a video. Now this one, he did this as a theme a number of times, where he's got a demon on a guy's head giving him grief, and the guy in torment over it. And I just found out today in reading the Lost Art Press books how something I suspected all along, which is that he did sometimes the same drawing over and over. I had heard from Harold Sieperman back in 2009. He was from Germany, and he told me that he knew people who knew about Kley, that he was known to have done a drawing and then done it again and done it again until it was to his satisfaction, and those were the ones that would get published, so that you wouldn't see all of the false starts. Claire Windling has said something similar about how she works. But I have seen, I have never seen these images before. I don't believe they've ever been reproduced before. But now we're starting to see what people know Kley for, which is incredible, out of his imagination, action among characters who happen to be animals, but who are so anthropomorphized that these may as well be people in conflicting situations, and some of them are accommodations of the two. He's done variations of this, the rhinoceros. Didn't he have one on a clothesline or on a tightrope or something?
On a tightrope.
Yes, and here they are on bottles. Lots of monkeys, which I just assume, since in some of the images of monkeys, they look as if he were looking at children in public and deciding that they were monkey enough to turn them into that in his sketchbooks. I wish that I knew more about Kley. Not a lot of people know much about him. I will say this, when I first saw these drawings, I was 20-ish, and I didn't like his work. I thought it was scratchy and messy, and I liked M.C. Escher and the Hildebrandt brothers and people who put a lot of rendered detail and would put 20 to 100 hours or more into an image. And these looked to me like he slapped them off fast. And then 18 years later, when I was 38, I got a chance to teach animal drawing for the first time. They had just offered as a course. Don Lagerberg invited me to teach it at Cal State Fullerton. And so the first thing I did was, okay, I got to get all the animal artists of history and collect the books and prepare slides to teach this class. And Don said, well, don't miss out on Heinrich Kley. And so I looked at Heinrich Kley's work again in the two famous Dover books that knocked me out, because in the ensuing 18 years, I learned something about drawing. I learned a bit how to draw myself. And I also saw that what he is doing is amazing. These are improvisations. These are like a musician who decides to sit down at the piano not knowing what I'm going to play, plunk out a few notes and see what comes of it, and then turn it into something, maybe with a preconceived idea. But he did this hundreds and perhaps thousands of times. I mean, what I've counted, I've got about 800 Heinrich Kley drawings that I can name as that is a Heinrich Kley drawing. And then to find this sketchbook, as Stuart did, and see that there are still a number that nobody has ever seen or seen since his time, and certainly not reproduced.
I just want to point out how this just caught my eye, how awesome this looks. He didn't outline the contours of the person in the back. He did it just through an indication of tone.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have any pencil work underneath to plan that. He just kind of did that. It's amazing to me.
Look what he's got. He's got that wedge shape that horse artists use, because that portion of the horse's forequarters are a bit like a tombstone tilted back, so that you get an up plane there where the light area is. And then he knows, okay, well, if her belly's going down, and if that's a plane break, and with using these beautiful graphic vertical lines, almost like a rhythm, he's indicated not only the thickness of that horse, oh, that beautiful knowledge of horse anatomy too, the concaves on the inside of the limbs, that hard plane break right there where that particular part of that's the wrist, that's the carpal mass on a horse. He has got those so deeply in his mind. His anatomy, having taught animal anatomy for over 60 semesters in colleges, I know it well enough to look at this and say, here's someone who knows it so well that he's hardly thinking about it. It's in his subconscious enough to where you can, and he already is familiar with those forms. So much so that he takes liberties with them, that I have heard some people say, I don't think he knows anatomy of an animal that well, as actually no, he knows it better than you, and so he's able to mess around with it where it might look a bit foreign because it's grotesquely exaggerated. Also, look, Stan, on the back he's got the lines because she's further away.
Yeah.
He's using atmospheric perspective just instinctively, which he does over and over. He'll accent one thing in the foreground and then things lighten up as they go back.
I just think it's very impressive when people don't immediately go towards outlines, because everybody or most beginners, they just focus on outlines.
Yeah, and if you know his background, he did the most beautiful factory renderings. I mean, it was commercial art of people working in factories and machinery and all this stuff, and they're painted. But the perspective is impeccable. The perspective is absolute top-notch, classic perspective, the kind that you would be trained in a German academy in the late 19th century. And so he knew forms and planes better than most mortals do. And then when he switched over to the improvisational sketches, all of that knowledge informs things like organic. Again, look what we've got. We've got death coming up to an old guy in a chair, and Heinrich Kley was ill a lot in his older age and had been visited by illness quite a bit. His beloved wife, whom he apparently separated from his family to marry her, apparently the relationship with the family ended, so that he could marry Fanny. And they were married for, I don't know how long, maybe 30 some years. And she died in 1922. And then he was remarried with a woman who later was in contact with Walt Disney to help Disney acquire these. Another thing should be said about these regarding Disney. Two artists of the 20th century who I hold in the highest esteem, and who my students might get sick of me mentioning them over and over, but most of them appreciate it, are Winsor McCay, because Winsor McCay was one of the most astonishing artists of the 20th century, and he was a popular artist, a cartoonist. He invented Little Nemo in Slumberland. And Heinrich Kley, because Heinrich Kley is, in my estimation, one of the 2 or 3 greatest draftsmen in the history of drawing, of this kind of drawing. And both of them are ones that Walt Disney expressly articulated his gratitude to. He told Winsor McCay's son that if it had not been for Winsor McCay, Disney Animation Studios wouldn't have happened. They were, as a studio, trying to bring animation up to the level that Winsor McCay had brought it single-handedly. And then, of course, they surpassed it, but they surpassed it in the 1930s with all of the wisdom of the great animators innovating at that time. Winsor McCay, of course, has been left out of the art history books. You get in that wonderful documentary of 7 one-hour installments on moguls and movie stars, which I've seen 6 times. It's a history of Hollywood from the 1890s all the way into the end of the studio system, 1960s. And I think it was the second one. They gave a little 2-minute, perhaps, spotlight on Winsor McCay, but it was so beautiful to see that commercial movies gave to Winsor McCay's drawings. And I felt like when I was watching, I felt like it was one of my family members that was being spotlighted. It was like, oh, Winsor McCay, I read hundreds of them to my son when he was little. Heinrich Kley has also been neglected by art historians. It just doesn't make it into the books because what he has to offer is incredible craft, which is not enough to make it into art history, but he also is a popular. I mean, this is cartooning. This is stuff that you would sell like you would sell a comic book. It was, even though these were more aimed at intellectuals, but he's just not taken seriously. And so that means most people don't know who he is. They don't know this work. A lot of people have seen the ice skating alligators because those have been famous enough. And most people, the first thing they hear about him is that he had an influence on Fantasia. And he did have an influence on Fantasia, obviously. But I think the influence on Fantasia isn't ultimately as significant as the influence on animators in general, and the Disney animators in particular, because they saw someone drawing with remarkable ability to see the action and the implied motion, and with skill that is greater than most people, including me at the age of 20, would give credit for it. Animators saw that in spite of the fact that this guy didn't make the pictures move, he was aware of weight, he was aware of drag. Drag is where when something moves, secondary things like hair or drapery will drag behind. He was aware of follow-through, where when something's moving and it stops. He was just uncannily in touch with the kind of concerns that animators would care about, and he also has been entirely neglected by artists. Should I stop talking while we...
There's a garbage truck.
The garbage truck goes by, yes.
Yeah, let's just wait a few seconds.
In my life, garbage happens. And maybe we should open up the window so they can hear it a little better.
There you go.
That is one impressive CR&R garbage truck. Yeah, it's Tuesday, and this is our day.
At least there's a nice image on screen.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good one. I like the snake a lot.
Okay, we'll keep this one. What was the last thing I was saying?
That looks like a donkey with with a horn.
Kley wasn't always the most flattering in his depictions of people. As a friend of mine pointed out when we were getting really excited about these some 20-some years ago, is that I get the feeling that a lot of these characters, he didn't really like them. And he is willing to non-idealize. I mean, if you're going to do a unicorn, you can make it beautiful and plump and pretty with bright colors, and here he's got a nearly emaciated donkey.
But that's more interesting, isn't it? Maybe he likes characters with more character.
Ah, I think so. Yeah.
Rather than just your average beautiful, stallion or your average Loomis head guy.
Yes, there's grit and gnarl, and these are people who sweat. These are people who are in bodies. His celebration of the human body is amazing. The people look comfortable in their nudity, in their clothing, and you've got frumpy types and sophisticated types and conceited types and earthy types. Lots and lots of...
Is it coming back?
Yeah, it's coming back. Well, just give him a little bit.
All right, yeah. Oh, it just went right past it.
Yeah, it just goes right past it.
That we wanted it to stay.
Yeah. It's a passive-aggressive garbage truck. A lot of mythical creatures. And another thing is just the productivity. The amount this guy drew. And every stroke has to be done with a pen that carries its ink only as you dip it into a well. So you may get one stroke or you may get 10 strokes out of one dip, but it doesn't seem that there's any apparent struggle from it.
Is that a pig flying through the air?
That is a pig flying
through the air. Is that a monkey on his back?
Yes, 60 years before Pink Floyd, or 40 years before Pink Floyd. Pigs fly, well, I guess it's a British thing too. Pigs fly, and a monkey, and a guy chasing him, and a demon bat guy, and a frog offering flowers, hoping to placate, perhaps. Don't chase my pig. I'm not sure what's going on.
Do you think he was on drugs?
I don't think he was on drugs, no.
Was he lonely? Or he just was trying to have some fun?
He wasn't that productive during his loneliest times. Okay. And no, should we bring up the thing on drugs? Because he's doing stuff that's fanciful, like Frank Zappa did in the 70s. Everybody figured Frank Zappa was on not just drugs, but hallucinogens, because he did surrealism. And Frank Zappa stated emphatically that he did not use hallucinogens, had no interest in them. He loved nicotine. So he did use drugs, but nicotine is a non-hallucinogenic drug. And there is an assumption when people do surreal stuff, when people see my sketchbook, they figure, well, he's doing that on drugs. The only drug I had in me when I was doing my sketchbook was coffee. People who do drugs do sometimes do imagery like this. Sometimes they do imagery that looks conservative. But no, I think if I was going to bet, I would bet that he was not using drugs. Okay. He was a guy whose imagination went this way. How old was it? He was born in 63, was it? 75 years old when he did this. Wow. And he did this more than once. I mean, this isn't exactly the same piece that I've seen published elsewhere. But even this creature, I've seen a creature very much like that. So that he's doing variation.
Illustration in the mid-20s of this same image, but then he comes back, 10 years later and does this looser drawing of it.
Yeah, Joseph Prokopio is...
You're not going to comment on the fact it sounds
it's like Prokopenko? Yes, I was aware that it was like Prokopenko. This is destiny, Stan.
Yeah.
He mentioned that, well, someone in there mentioned, it might have been Alexander, that he made money, but he didn't make a lot of money, and he had to live meagerly. And he had his productive times where he made more money, but he had an agent or a rep or a gallery owner who would say, do more like that, and so he would do them to order.
He had the gallery in Munich that would sell his works very easily, and that he would, upon request, redraw something or go back to the same subject if a client asked for it.
Yes.
So he had no problem doing 3 or 4 different versions of the same drawing.
Yeah, it was commercial art. Oh gosh, it's just incredible.
Yeah, he do much color?
Illustration.
He did more color than anybody realized that he did, because it's just come out since these books. Yeah.
Inks.
Jim Vadaboncourt's Images magazine. I've got the collection down here. The first one that he spotlighted was what Kley did. And this is Kley. And these things are still available. The Vadaboncourt collection, and they're called Images magazine, and you buy them from him. And when these came out, they introduced all sorts of things nobody had ever seen before, and we were thrilled about. So this was just another treasure chest being opened up.
Is this watercolor right on, on top of his inks?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And then when the Lost Art Press ones came out, another treasure chest. So that's the example. That's an example of the kinds of things that he did of factories with watercolor, pen and ink, oil. And something as mundane as go in and paint the factory.
Yeah, it looks totally different.
He makes them look gorgeous. They're composed as works of art. So this is another side of Heinrich Kley.
Yeah, I saw the title up there, though.
Yeah. Well, that's inspiration for wise words. Oh, even just when we get to the content, I mean, I need a half a semester of constant exposure to this stuff. I can teach an entire semester on Kley and never exhaust the material, just because, not only because there's so much, but also, if a person wants to learn how to draw in the classic sense, this is the kind of drawing that started to emerge 600 years ago. Obviously, by the time Da Vinci is in, and the Renaissance artists are drawing like this, you can look at all sorts of things in Da Vinci's sketchbook that have this approach, which is that you learn the anatomy, you learn the forms, you learn how light falls on the forms. I mean, every line on that bear is a kind of perspective line, and when it isn't, it becomes a rhythmic or a compositional line. Look at these beautiful shapes, and getting that fused together is something that he was just great at that.
Marshall, this looks just like one of your horse sketches that we recently used in the Comic-Con video.
It does, except that that's on another level.
Were you inspired by his horse sketches?
Oh, absolutely. I've looked at his horses and drawn from them over and over, and I am trying to get away from it. When Justin Sweet was being likened to Frank Frazetta often, there came a point where he just, Frank Frazetta was kind of inspired me and kind of got me started. But then he moved on to Dean Cornwell and C. Wyeth and Howard Pyle and other really, artists who there's a sophistication in their work that goes even beyond as great as Frazetta's stuff is. So there does come a point where you recognize I've fallen in love with an aunt or uncle, that I want to be like them when I grow up. And so you work to be like them, and then you realize I'm sort of copying them. I'm sort of doing too much of that kind of thing. I did that with Escher a lot when I was young.
Looks like you're riding the horse too. I think it was meant to be.
I got the peg leg and the shape of the head.
Mine's the leg, but really,
yeah, the shape of the head is Marshall.
That's you.
So I didn't get my nose. Is it okay to go in here, Stuart, and draw over the top of it put the nose in there?
You just put your picture on that.
But when I look at these, I know enough about my own skill to do what a professional clarinetist might say when they compare themselves to Benny Goodman. I mean, you say, I can tell there is a difference. When I listen to someone that's that good, I may be competent, but there is a difference. And when I look at Kley's stuff, I see that there is a miles-wide gap that might not be evident to a beginner. But when you get further along, you recognize, okay, I made it 10 miles, but there's 100 more to go.
You calling me a beginner?
Yeah. You are young grasshopper. Powerful imagery, too.
Is that one of yours, too?
No. This one has been reproduced. And I think it's a different version of it, because the one I remember, I don't think he had the spot blacks in there. He did another version of this character dancing like that I've used in classes to show, you know, there's a gesture, there's an awareness of this guy's energy and movement and weight, and then he goes in there and quickly puts the scales around it. Kley would be, according to, this was, you know, he was about the time of Carl Jung, and then later Myers-Briggs, mother-daughter team who researched personalities based on Jung's model for temperament types, and then later David Keirsey. That Myers-Briggs, David Keirsey temperament types analysis, he would be a solid sensory perceiver, an SP is what they're called. And there's these 4 polarities, but most of the great artists were extremely sensory. That is, they're very in touch with their sensory world, the ink on the paper, the actual thing in space. And perceiver, the P, or prober, means that they'll do it over and over and over and over and over again. They don't tend to be the most responsible people by nature. They have to tame themselves or discipline themselves into responsibleness. They just like to do something and mess around with it. But it's characteristic of many of the great artists. And Kley, at least on that perceiver prober, was obviously met deadlines and did work and was disciplined enough to where that's part of his greatness. There is a wildness, there's a freedom, there's a kidliness, a childlike lack of fear, a throw yourself into it and ruin it and don't let any grown-ups give you guilt over it. And yet at the same time, it has such command of the difficult disciplines of pen and ink technique, knowing how a foot is constructed enough to just throw that foot in there carelessly. Look at that arm. I mean, these aren't the most impressive examples of anatomy. What is this? This is Moses having a chat with God or having a chat with Merlin, or?
Well, sure. The glowing head makes me think it's God. But
yeah, and that he's got stars on.
But yeah, the stars make it look.
But it's about the 10 Commandments, and it's making me wonder whether God's got glasses on. That's another thing.
God has glasses?
Yeah, he's holding glasses. Hold his glasses. Huh. But yeah, that is definitely Michelangelo's Moses. And they are having a chat. And the human looks as if he's taking God to task, which is biblical. It's like that, I can't remember the character in the Old Testament. I think it's Abraham who was bargaining with God and said, okay, I'll bargain with you. Oh, that's a famous one. And it may be the exact one. It looks to me like it's the exact one that was printed in the Dover.
Some of you know that I teach online, and I'm planning more, including a series of studies from great masters. You can subscribe at my website, martialart.com/subscribe.
What else should we say about this? I really don't think he was thinking of these sketchbooks as commodities. Yeah, it's works of art that somebody's going to take them and treasure them.
It sure seems like it, though.
How do you
Does it? Because they're so... they're not that loose. Like, the subject matter is loose and very creative, and it seems like he would just come up with super random ideas, but
yeah,
he wasn't searching much in these. His lines fall into the place he wants them right away. It seems like that.
Yeah, I do see that, yeah. And now that you mention it, they're in good condition.
Yeah, they're very presentable, so I don't know. It seems like he might want people to look at it.
But even, oh gosh, look at that guy. It may be also that he was just so good.
Yeah, that's probably, because I look at some other artist sketchbooks like today that are living, and their sketchbooks are very presentable, just even when they are playing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's these recordings of Art Tatum playing in people's homes at their home piano, and you can hear people, you know, conversing and clinking glass in the back, and they're just as astonishing as any of his recordings that he did in the studio under the pressure, because he was just that good. It's like Professor Robert Greenberg said about Mozart, he couldn't write a bad piece of music.
But if it was just a thing that he would put his thoughts on, wouldn't he have like words or just like notes that would, you know, things to remember or cross things out, like, oh no, I don't like this part and I'm going to do it here.
Maybe.
Like, you know, like, it seems like nothing in here is for only himself.
Yeah, it's not completely private. These are not note pages. This is a sketchbook. Okay, and so now we're going back to the studies. And
you think these are from life? The plant stuff? Like
it would make sense, wouldn't it? They don't look improvised, they look observational.
Yeah.
It's like I've got all this stuff in my head, I put it out, now I'm going to recharge it by
and then
looking
do you
at
think he would do these and then he would need to
get an idea?
He would get something in his head and he had to get it out?
Yeah, figure he's right-handed, apparently. And so doing this, now I want to play. Yeah. I did my homework. Time to mess around. Oh, those lines.
The shading in here is just so masterful. It's so amazing to look at that. The way he creates texture and form with the lines there.
He does.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, I have always understood that he did not use pencil underdrawing, but I saw some that had pencil underdrawing. It was at Comic-Con. And this looks to me like it does have some pencil underdrawing. Or it may be that is not pencil underdrawing. There's some very faint lines in there that seem like a part of it, and they look to me like they might be graphite.
Maybe he erased them.
It may be.
But wait, I think I see. Oh, I do see pencil.
Yeah. So there is graphite. Now that's not unusual. However, in the underdrawing, the pencil underdrawing that you can see in Winsor McCay, that you can see in Arthur Rackham, and that what I've seen in here is so loose that the only concern addressed with that pencil is placement. So it's macro positioning, that I'm going to have some things like this, and then by that time you can then see where everything goes. Ralph Steadman talked about how he does not like to work everything out in a drawing beforehand because then there's nothing to discover. Whereas 90+% of the work I did commercially, everything had to be worked out beforehand and approved by clients so that there was no guesswork at the end. But then you take away the option for spontaneity. So if there's any rule about planning versus spontaneity, or any law to suggest, it's to let the planning happen with the big parts.
Well, you did a lot of product design and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a whole different set of criteria.
Yeah.
But even something like this, you know, I would have done a pencil drawing and then go in and decide where those core shadows were. He's not even using core shadows there. You know, plan all that stuff out. Bernie Wrightson, when he did the Frankenstein illustrations, planned out the position of where the strokes were going to be for all sorts of things. And that is typically the professional way to work. Because it's like rehearsal, where you've got everything worked out so that you've got a safety net and you hope for inspiration in those final marks, but they are not genuinely spontaneous. You've got to get a spontaneous approach to them. Whereas with Kley, there is a great deal of genuine spontaneity going on in those. They aren't all worked out. That is also like one that is where a lion, her husband, or there was a kind of a marital conflict thing going on in one of his illustrations with that. She was looking at a rooster and a reptile making out. Wow, look at that.
So that's a female?
That looks like a rooster, but I don't know. Maybe some chickens.
I guess chickens
get more decorated. Yeah. I don't know that much. Bragged about how I've taught animal drawing so many times, and I don't know the difference between a chicken and a rooster. Look at that. Let's do this last couple pages.
I think it looks like you again, Marshall. There you are.
Also looks like him too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Well, he gained weight when he was older. I mean, I always imagined him because I've seen so many pictures of where he does an artist who's a really lean guy drawing, and I figured, well, that's a bit of a self-portrait. But there's not that many pictures of him. But here we definitely got old men drawing.
Well, it's an old man with a big nose and a white beard. That's you.
That's me. And I look more and more like that. And he's got a hat on, so
Although
he can hide his
looks older.
baldness.
That's you.
I mean, that's another 10 years, yeah. Maybe 15. Okay.
That's it.
Well, we did it. We went through the whole book. I'm not nervous anymore. And this is, now we went from April to, is that?
January 12th? Or is that December 1st? December 1st.
December 1st. So this was more than a half a year on this. And it does not mean that these were all that he was doing, because he may have been doing commercial jobs that he was doing on loose leaf paper.
Cool. That's
Okay,
it, right?
yeah.
See you guys.
Woo!
Thank you, Marshall, and thank you, Stuart Ing. If you love art books, Stuart's bookstore is one of the best out there. I always make sure to make a stop at the Stuart Ing booth at Comic-Con every year. Stuart has a lot of popular books, but he also publishes and translates rare art books. So check out his bookstore online at stuartingbooks.com to find amazing art books that you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for watching. See you all next time.